They weren't supposed to be like us. They were supposed to be beasts, primitive, brutal, grunting shapes lost to time. But what if we've been wrong, completely wrong? What if the very first humans weren't simple, but sacred? Not savages, but scientists, philosophers, artists? What if buried beneath dirt and bones lies a forgotten genius, our own? This is the story of the first prehistoric men, and the revelations that could rewrite human history. The bones that shouldn't exist. For centuries, we thought we knew the beginning. Africa, 200,000 years ago. A spark in the dark, the birth of modern man. But in 2017, something surfaced from the dust that shattered that timeline like glass. The place was Jebel Irhoud, a rocky, wind-lashed site in Morocco, about 100 kilometers west of Marrakesh. It had been known since the 1960s, first as a mining site, then a dig for Neanderthal fossils. But for decades, those bones were misunderstood. Then, a re-examination began. New tools, new dating methods, new eyes. What they found changed everything. Buried beneath layers of sediment, researchers uncovered a jawbone, a partial skull, limb bones, and stone tools, all of which dated to a staggering 300,000 years ago. Let that sink in. That's 100,000 years older than the previously accepted start date of Homo sapiens. This wasn't a side branch of the evolutionary tree. This was us. And we were here long before anyone thought possible. But that wasn't the only shock. When forensic artists reconstructed the skulls, with their mix of ancient and modern features, something unsettling happened. The face looking back at them wasn't brutish. It wasn't alien. It wasn't missing. It was familiar. The brow slightly heavier. The brain slightly smaller. But the eyes, the cheekbones, the expression, it looked like someone you might sit next to on a train. Like someone who could whisper a story to you in the dark, and you'd understand every word. For paleoanthropologist Jean-Jacques Hublin, the man behind the discovery, it was earth-shattering. This material represents the very root of our species. It makes the African origin of Homo sapiens a continent-wide phenomenon. Not an East African moment, but a Pan-African mystery. And the implications? If Homo sapiens existed in the northwest of Africa 300,000 years ago, that means they had to evolve even earlier, maybe 350,000 or even 400,000 years ago. The old textbook timeline? Burn it. But what were they like? What were those first humans doing out there in the savannas and valleys of ancient Morocco? Hunting, obviously. But something else was found at Jebel Irhoud, something sharp, small, and deceptively simple. Stone tools. And not just any tools. Blades so precisely shaped they seemed closer to surgery than survival. The kind of craftsmanship that only comes from practice, communication, and intention. Which begs the question, who taught them? Where did they learn such skill? And were they really the first? Because here's where the ground beneath our feet gets truly unstable. Jebel Irhoud isn't the only site rewriting history. What if I told you tools like these, tools forged by minds like ours, have been found in places and times that defy every theory we've been taught? What if prehistoric man wasn't just surviving? He was thinking, and what they left behind proves it. Tools of the mind. In the next section, we'll dive deep into the first technologies. Not just rocks and sticks, but instruments of meaning, and how, scattered across Africa, Asia, and Europe, they reveal the minds of the forgotten. Tools of the mind. A stone is just a stone, until it becomes a tool. Then it becomes a message. It says, I was here. I made this. I thought. I had purpose. And that's exactly what scientists are beginning to realize. Because the oldest known stone tools aren't 100,000 years old, or even 500,000. They go back 3.3 million years. Before Homo sapiens. Before Neanderthals. Even before Homo erectus. These tools predate humanity itself. Found in Kenya's Lake Turkana region, they were shaped by a different kind of human, possibly Australopithecus afarensis, the same species as Lucy, the famous fossil. So what does that mean? It means intelligence began not with us, but with them. And intelligence was not a sudden explosion. It was a fire, kindled over millions of years. But let's zoom forward to Blombo's Cave, South Africa, 75,000 years ago. Inside its limestone belly, a different kind of tool was discovered. Not for hunting, not for cutting, but for drawing. A small piece of ochre, engraved with a crosshatch pattern. It's deliberate, it's abstract, and it might be the oldest known symbol in human history. Let that sink in. Before we carved gods, before we spoke languages, before we even settled into villages, we were scratching meaning into stone. What was the pattern for? A map, a memory, a message for the future? We may never know, but its existence tells us something vital. They weren't just shaping tools, they were shaping thoughts. And that's where everything begins. Across Europe, Asia, and Africa, we begin to see the spread of human ingenuity. Blades, scrapers, drills, needles, fishhooks, and bone flutes. Yes, flutes. The earliest known musical instrument, a flute made from vulture bone, was found in the caves of southern Germany, estimated to be around 40,000 years old. Before the wheel, before writing, before agriculture, there was music, which raises a stunning question. Why? Music serves no direct survival function. You don't need a song to hunt a mammoth. So why did they carve holes into bone, tune their breath to melody, and echoes sound through stone walls? Because music wasn't about survival. It was about meaning, about togetherness, about something greater. This wasn't the tool of an animal. This was the ritual of a soul. But there's something even more powerful than tools, even more revolutionary than fire. And once it began, there was no going back, because with it came story. First words, first stories. Language. It's the magic trick we perform every day without thinking. But where did it come from? We'll never find the first spoken sentence. Words vanish in the wind. They leave no fossils. But the consequences of speech, they're everywhere. Imagine a group of early humans huddled near a fire. Now imagine that, for the first time in history, one of them begins to speak. Not grunt, not gesture, but name. A name for fire. A name for mother. A name for death. In that moment, reality became shareable. Ideas no longer had to live and die in a single brain. They could spread, grow, evolve. And that changed everything. Most scientists believe the roots of language go back at least 100,000 to 200,000 years, possibly even farther. Some think it began with gesture, then sound. Others believe singing came before speaking, that language was born as song. But however it began, its arrival marked the start of something staggering. Memory now had wings, because suddenly you could describe the past. You could warn others about danger. You could tell stories and keep them alive. And those stories, they became culture. In the caves of France and Spain, we see not just paintings, but narratives. Herds of animals in motion. A hunt unfolding in frozen time. Handprints that seem to reach out through millennia. One wall in El Castillo cave shows a red disc, at least 40,800 years old. Possibly the oldest cave art on Earth. But who made it? Some researchers believe it could have been Neanderthals. Yes, them. The species we once thought dull and brutish. Now we know they buried their dead, cared for the sick, and perhaps even told stories in paint. Maybe they weren't just our cousins. Maybe they were our co-authors. But the greatest story prehistoric people told wasn't about animals, or hunts, or survival. It was about what comes after. Because across time and space, we see one consistent obsession: death, and what lies beyond it. Hook before next chapter. But before we can understand their beliefs about death, we must confront something haunting. They didn't fear death the way we do. They treated it like a doorway. Sacred death and burial. Most animals flee from death. They run. They forget. But humans, we stop. We remember. And that began long, long ago. In a cave in Israel called Kafsa, archaeologists found a 92,000-year-old grave. Inside lay the body of a young man. Placed next to him, the bones of a deer. Why? Some believe it was an offering, a companion for the next world. An ancient ritual of goodbye. This wasn't an accident. This was intention. Nearby, the remains of a child were buried, covered in red ochre. Not just placed in a hole, but painted. Why would a prehistoric human go to such lengths? Because something powerful had awakened. The concept that death wasn't just an end. It was a passage. In Shanidar Cave, Iraq, Neanderthal skeletons were found buried with pollen from wildflowers. Not scattered. Placed. One individual, a man, had been crushed in a rockfall. But others buried him, gently, in a shallow pit. The Neanderthals didn't just bury their dead. They may have mourned them. We once thought them incapable of emotion. But this was grief. The same grief we carry today. A love so strong, it survives death. In Europe, burials become more elaborate over time. Graves from 30,000 years ago include necklaces of animal teeth, carved ivory figurines, tools, beads, and shells from distant coasts. Each item whispered the same truth. You were more than your body. You had meaning. But what's most chilling is what some burials don't include. In certain regions, skulls were removed from bodies, carefully cleaned, sometimes decorated. Were they honoring ancestors, practicing early religion, or something darker? No one knows for sure. But the way we treat our dead says everything about how we view life. And in these graves, dug with care, marked with pigment, honored with memory, we see a soul begin to form. A soul that didn't just survive. It looked to the stars and asked, "Where do we go now?" Hook before next chapter. But here's the real twist. While we were burying our dead, we weren't alone in the world. There were others, walking beside us, thinking, hunting, dreaming, and their blood still flows in our veins. They were not alone. What if I told you, humans once shared the earth? Not with apes, not with animals, but with other humans. Because for most of history, we were not the only kind. There were the Neanderthals of Europe, the Denisovans of Asia, the tiny Homo floresiensis of Indonesia, just over 3 feet tall, and even Homo naledi, deep in the caves of South Africa. Each had their own culture, their own tools, their own way of life. They weren't our ancestors. They were our siblings. And then something even more shocking. In the Denisova cave in Siberia, scientists found a finger bone. When they tested its DNA, they discovered it belonged to a child of 2 species. Her mother, a Neanderthal. Her father, a Denisovan. Let that sink in. 2 entirely different species had a child together. Her name today is Denny. And she proves that ancient humans loved across lines. This wasn't war. It was union. It was family. And they left more than bones behind. Modern humans, including you, carry their genes. Up to 4% Neanderthal DNA in Europeans and Asians. Denisovan DNA in Melanesians, Aboriginal Australians, and Southeast Asians. Even high-altitude adaptation in Tibetans comes from Denisovans. We didn't wipe them out. We absorbed them. Their blood lives on in us, in our skin, our immune systems, our breath. When you inhale the cold air of a mountain, when your body fights off disease, when your face carries ancient shadows, you carry their story. They were never erased, only remembered, quietly, in our DNA. But what happened to them? Why are we the only ones left? Some blame climate. Others say we had better tools, or larger networks. But some believe there's a darker truth. That we outcompete them. Took their land. Took their food. Took everything. We'll never know the full story. But perhaps, when you look into the mirror, you'll see not just yourself, but the ghosts of those who walked beside us. The humans we lost, and the humans who became us. Hook before next chapter. But there's more. Because some of the first humans weren't just survivors. They were artists, engineers, thinkers, and what they left behind challenges everything we thought we knew about prehistoric intelligence. The genius of the forgotten. What if we've underestimated the ancient mind? What if the people we call primitive were crafting ideas so advanced we're only now catching up? Because from the Arctic to the Sahara, from Indonesia to the Amazon, remnants of lost genius are being unearthed and ignored. Let's begin in a swamp. In Poverty Point, Louisiana, archaeologists discovered an enormous complex of concentric ridges and mounds. Built over 3,000 years ago, it spans nearly a mile across. No metal, no wheels, no written language, just thousands of prehistoric people, moving 30 million pounds of earth by hand. They aligned it to the stars. It served as a trade hub, and its design was precisely engineered. The name Poverty Point suggests backwardness, but its people built one of the most complex prehistoric cities in North America. They weren't poor. They were architects of memory. Now jump to Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, dated at 11,600 years ago, older than Stonehenge or the pyramids. Massive limestone pillars, 16 tons each, arranged in ritual circles. Carvings of animals, symbols, and strange humanoid figures. But here's the kicker. It was built before agriculture, before cities, before what we thought was possible. That means hunter-gatherers built this temple. They gathered to worship before they settled to farm. Religion didn't arise from civilization. Civilization may have arisen from belief. We're finding signs of genius everywhere we once dismissed. Astronomical alignments in ancient tombs, underwater megaliths off the coast of Japan, trade networks stretching thousands of miles long before roads. Each find paints a different picture, one where prehistoric people weren't simply surviving. They were organizing, measuring, building, believing. And the biggest mind of all might have belonged to a woman. A single carved figurine, the Venus of Whole Fells, dates back over 35,000 years. Her hips are wide, her breasts exaggerated. She's not realism, she's symbolism. Some see fertility, others power. Some think she's the first goddess. Whoever carved her wasn't just making a figure, they were making meaning. She's the first statue we've ever found, and she might be the first portrait of the divine. Hook before next chapter. But all this genius would have meant nothing without one element, one force that transformed our ancestors from prey into predators, and from wanderers into kings. Fire. The fire that made us human. We didn't discover fire. We tamed it, and it changed everything. Before fire, humans were just another animal. But then, a flash, a strike of lightning, a spark that caught the grass and burned. Someone, maybe a child, watched that fire, inched closer, realized it gave warmth, light, protection, and most important of all, transformation. Because once we controlled fire, we could cook. Cooked food requires less chewing, less digestion. It gave our ancestors more energy to think, speak, imagine. Some scientists believe cooking is the very reason our brains grew larger. Fire didn't just warm our homes. It rewired our evolution. But it did more than feed us. It protected us from predators. It extended our days. It became a center of community, a sacred circle. The first true home wasn't four walls. It was flame. We gathered around it to share stories, to mourn our dead, to forge tools, to dream. And still, today, fire remains central. We light candles for the dead. We build bonfires in celebration. We place eternal flames at monuments to the fallen. Why? Because fire is memory. It's power. It's magic we still can't quite explain. The ancients knew this. From Prometheus in Greek myth, to the Zoroastrian sacred flame, to the eternal fires found in temples across time, fire was never just science. It was a soul. But with fire came fear. Because to wield power is to risk destruction. And one day, something came from the sky and nearly wiped us out. When the sky fell, humanity's near extinction. Around 74,000 years ago, the world went quiet. Birdsong vanished. Sunlight dimmed. Ash fell like snow. A supervolcano in what is now Lake Toba, Indonesia, erupted. One of the largest explosions in Earth's history. It hurled 800 cubic kilometers of ash into the sky, blocked out the sun, triggered global cooling, and nearly ended the human story before it truly began. Scientists believe the aftermath created a bottleneck. Our ancestors, once numbering in the tens of thousands, were reduced to a few thousand survivors. Maybe fewer. You are the descendant of a tiny, fragile remnant. A thread of life that refused to break. But it wasn't just Toba. Evidence from around the world points to other cataclysms. Massive floods, cosmic impacts, periods of extreme drought, even mysterious climate swings. Something, or perhaps many things, threatened us again and again. But we adapted. We held on. Because we had each other. Small bands, tight groups, bound by blood, by fire, by story. Survival didn't come from strength alone. It came from connection. We protected the injured, fed the elderly, carried our babies across mountains and ice. Other species didn't. We did. And that made all the difference. It also explains something else. Why we started building symbols of permanence. Burials, cave art, stone circles, monuments. We were no longer just surviving. We were remembering. Because when you nearly vanish from the earth, you don't just want to live. You want to be remembered. And maybe that's why so many ancient myths begin with destruction. Floods that swallow the world. Fires that fall from heaven. Darkness that lasts for days. From the Epic of Gilgamesh, to the Hopi legends of fiery stars, to the Aboriginal stories of great burning skies, the memory of near extinction still haunts us. Because maybe, just maybe, those myths aren't just stories. Maybe they're echoes of a sky that fell, and a people that rose again. Hook before next chapter. But here's the question. If so many humans vanished, and so many civilizations reset, what was lost? What didn't survive? A map of unknown civilizations. What if we're only seeing half the picture? For centuries, history was written by those who came after, not by those who were there. Because prehistory has no books, no scrolls, no names, but it has ruins. And some of them don't fit the timeline. In the Amazon rainforest, scientists using LiDAR, laser scanning from aircraft, recently discovered an entire network of cities hidden beneath the jungle canopy. Roads, causeways, canals, connected like a spiderweb across hundreds of miles. This wasn't tribal. It was urban. And yet, it had vanished, swallowed by time, trees, and conquest. What other cities were lost before we even knew to name them? In the Sahara Desert, once a lush savanna, lie the crumbled bones of ancient civilizations, buried under sand dunes that have shifted for 10,000 years. The Green Sahara hosted lakes, giraffes, and early human settlements. But when the rain stopped, so did the records. What they built, what they believed, we don't know, because all we have is silence. Then there's Yonaguni, Japan, a strange underwater structure that looks sculpted. Terraces, steps, columns. Some geologists say it's natural. Others say it's the remnant of a civilization drowned by rising seas, before recorded history began. If that's true, it would push human construction back thousands of years. And it's not alone. From the flooded ruins off India's coast, to the mysterious stones of Nan Madol in Micronesia, to the megaliths of Gunung Padang in Indonesia, we're finding traces. Not proof, but whispers. Whispers of a forgotten map. A human story erased by water, war, and time. But there's something even stranger. Some ancient cultures seemed to know things they shouldn't. They tracked the stars with impossible accuracy. aligned temples to equinoxes and solstices, mapped the heavens without telescopes. Oh, how did they know? Hook before next chapter. Some say it was simple observation. Others believe they inherited lost knowledge from civilizations even older, ones we've never found, and maybe never will. Unexplainable finds, erased records. Sometimes the Earth gives up secrets that make no sense. Tools too old, maps too accurate, knowledge that shouldn't exist. Each find is a thread, and when you pull it, the whole timeline starts to unravel. Let's start with a simple hammer. In Texas, a 1930s hiker found what looked like a petrified rock, with a metal hammerhead poking out. When scientists examined it, they were stunned. The rock around it was hundreds of millions of years old. Too old for any human, let alone tools. Now, skeptics say the rock formed around a modern object, that it's a natural concretion. But the hammer's composition, 96% iron, free of impurities, is unlike any modern metallurgy. Could it be a hoax? Sure. But what if it's not? Now let's look at a map. The Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral, depicts the coast of South America in shockingly accurate detail. Even more baffling, it appears to show Antarctica without ice. Modern geologists didn't confirm that coast until 1958, using seismic scans beneath the ice. So how did a map from the 1500s include it? The admiral himself claimed he copied it from much older maps. Maps we no longer have. Maps possibly based on knowledge from civilizations long erased. Knowledge can survive fire. But paper, it burns. Then there are the objects. Polished granite spheres weighing tons, buried in Costa Rica. 100,000-year-old aluminum-like wedges found in Romania. Cave paintings that show beings with helmets, antennas, or what look like spacecraft. Are they symbolic, religious, or something else? Mainstream science says these are misinterpretations, pareidolia, myth, coincidence. And often that's true. But every so often, a find emerges that simply doesn't fit. And when it doesn't fit, it gets ignored, or locked away, or dismissed. Not because it's fake, but because it frightens the narrative. And perhaps the most haunting question of all, what have we not found? There are regions of the Amazon, Africa, and Siberia where no one has set foot in centuries. Caves sealed for 50,000 years. Islands never scanned. Ruins overgrown with jungle. In 2023, a team scanning the Balamku cave in Mexico discovered undisturbed ritual chambers sealed since the Maya, untouched for 1,000 years. If that was hidden just feet underground, what else lies waiting in the deep? Hook before next chapter. But one thing is clear. Among all the humans that ever lived, only one group rose to dominate the world. Why? What did we have that the others didn't? The rise of Homo sapiens and the fall of everyone else. 50,000 years ago, the world was full of humans. Not just one kind, but many. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis, Homo naledi, and us, Homo sapiens. No, only we remain. What happened? For years, scientists believed Homo sapiens were stronger, smarter, superior. But new evidence challenges that. Neanderthals had larger brains, built tools, made art, cared for the injured, and survived the brutal ice age of Europe. Denisovans adapted to extreme altitudes, possibly even built stone structures. So why did we survive, and they didn't? One theory, culture. Homo sapiens formed larger groups, shared ideas faster, used language more fluidly, created social networks. In a fight, one Neanderthal might be stronger, but 10 Homo sapiens, coordinating, planning, communicating, could win every time. Victory didn't come from the body. It came from the tribe. Another reason, adaptability. We moved fast. We lived in forests, deserts, mountains, coasts. We shifted diets, invented tools, taught each other, built on each other's ideas. And over time, we spread. to Australia, to the Americas, to islands thousands of miles apart. We became unstoppable. But the most haunting possibility, we didn't just outlive the others. We may have wiped them out. There's evidence of competition, resource conflicts, even hybrid offspring that hint at conquest as much as contact. Did we eliminate the others, or simply outlast them? No one knows, but the result is the same. We became the last human standing, and with no one left to challenge us, we began to shape the world in our image. And yet, not all of us moved forward equally. Some remained in isolated pockets, living with ancient traditions, echoes of a time before cities, writing, or kings. You can still find them, barely, in remote tribes. The Hadza of Tanzania, the Jarawa of the Andaman Islands, the Yanomami of the Amazon. People living much like the first Homo sapiens once did. People who carry secrets we've forgotten. Hooked before next chapter. And that brings us to the final mystery. What legacy did we leave behind? Not just in bones and ruins, but in ourselves. The legacy we forgot to remember. What if the greatest discovery isn't buried in the earth, but in us? Not in bones, not in tools, but in memory. Because even though the first prehistoric men are long gone, they still live inside you. Their footprints faded. Their monuments crumbled. Their names never written. And yet, your hands still make fire. Your eyes still seek the stars. Your heart still breaks at loss, and rejoices at birth. You still gather with others around flickering screens, the new firelight, to share stories. That is the oldest tradition of all. Let's go back to that cave in southern France. The Chauvet Cave. Deep within its belly, untouched for 30,000 years, lie paintings of lions, mammoths, rhinos. But there's one image that stands out. A human hand, pressed in pigment, left on the wall. A signature, a whisper through time. I was here. And that same impulse, to mark, to remember, to reach forward, is still in you. Every photograph, every journal, every digital post. You're still trying to say the same thing. I was here. But our legacy goes deeper than culture. It's in our blood. Inside you are echoes of the Neanderthal, the Denisovan, the unknown ancestors we've never even named. Your body is a museum, a living archive, and in it are traits passed down through 2 million years. The fear of the dark, from nights when eyes glowed in the bushes. The joy of music, from drumbeats by fire. The power of speech, the one gift that changed everything. We think we're modern, but you are ancient. Every time you tell a story, you continue the oldest ritual on Earth. And what did they teach us? That we're not born knowing how to be human. We learn it from others, from our past. And we forget that too easily. We think progress is the only direction, that newer is better, that the ancients were foolish. But they lived in ways we're only now trying to remember. Connected to nature, connected to each other, living slowly, dying with meaning. They didn't just survive. They belonged. And here's the final twist. We call them prehistoric. But that's not true. They are history. We're just the continuation of it. They're not them. They are us, in another time. You are not the end of the story. You're a chapter. And maybe, 10,000 years from now, someone will uncover our ruins, our bones, our stories, and wonder, who were they? The first prehistoric men were not cavemen. They were artists, engineers, explorers, storytellers. And through every fire we light, every word we speak, every monument we leave behind, we whisper back across time. We remember you. You mattered. You still do. Because history isn't written in books. It's etched in DNA, in dreams, in dirt. And in the end, the greatest revelation about the first prehistoric men is that we never really left them behind. If this journey opened your eyes, even just a little, this is where ancient truths come alive. Subscribe for more stories like this. Share this if you believe more people should know what we've forgotten. And tell us in the comments, what part of humanity's forgotten past do you feel most connected to?